Luke here of SimBoxx, and today I'm delighted to welcome on a special guest, Mr. Thomas Treiber, the voice of boxing. Thomas, thanks for joining us here on SimBoxx. How are you today, my friend?
I am fantastic, Luke. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.
Good man, so we're here at the start of 2026, so we'll get the formalities out the way. Did you have a happy holidays or a new year? Was all that good with family?
I did. I did. Christmas, I was in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia for the December 27th event there. So I was there for Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, made it home, and I had just completed 9 weeks straight of travel and events. So didn't go out on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. I laid low and just try to catch up on some sleep. But very thankful for all the work I had in 2025 and had a great holiday.
How was that in terms of, you're American, I'm English, the Christmas period is a pinpoint on the calendar. So to spend Christmas Eve, Christmas Day and work Boxing Day with a huge show out in Riyadh with the Ring magazine show, how was that in terms of adjusting your mindset, if you like, that it wasn't a time for celebrations, relaxing, feasting, everything else that comes along with Christmas, but you had to keep your business mind on?
Yeah, I mean, you're there to perform. You're there to do a job. On Christmas Day, I actually did the press conference for the event. So, you know, you're you know that it's Christmas. You know the holidays going on, but it certainly was very different. To be in Saudi Arabia during Christmas. I think this is my first time actually not in the United States for Christmas. So it was definitely different, but again, just very thankful for the work I've been getting.
Of course. So let's go back. Let's go back to the very start of the story with Thomas Treiber. If we can, we'll pick bits and pieces out as we go along. But I'm fascinated to know about where did the love of combat sports, boxing, wrestling, where did all that really come into the forefront of the mind of Thomas Treiber as a young man, a young child, maybe?
Well, when I was around 11, 12 years old, I became a huge professional wrestling fan. I mean, that was when WrestleMania was just starting. I believe WrestleMania 1 was in 1985. I attended WrestleMania 2 in Chicago. That was when they did Chicago, LA, and New York all on one event. So I saw the British Bulldogs beat Greg Valentine and Beefcake to win the WWF tag team titles. Of course, they had Ozzy Osbourne in their corner. So it was at that point right there that I said, wow, I would love in some way to be part of this someday. So as you know, I continued throughout my teenage years. When I was 17 years old, a good friend of mine who was in my class, I was a senior in high school, him and his brother were amateur boxers, and his brother was turning professional. And I got the idea of, how would you become a ring announcer? Because I was already interested in broadcasting. So long story short, my friend talked to his brother. His brother introduced me to a promoter in Indiana. I grew up just outside Chicago and got my start ring announcing in the state of Indiana. And he gave me an opportunity. I was 17 years old. I was still in high school, fell in love with it. I said, wow, I just want to continue doing this. I want to continue getting better at it. And as you keep doing something, one opportunity led to another. And here I am 35 years later.
Amazing. So when you say that back when you was a teen, obviously people grow and the voice changes and your bodies develop. But did you have the kind of voice for the task even back then? You see yourself or David Diamante or Michael Buffer or Bruce Buffer. It's a very distinct voice. It's a very distinct blessing,
Yeah.
if you like, to possess those talents. Was that something you realized you had early on that you could go and be unique and successful as a ring announcer?
Well, I certainly never thought that it would turn out to be a career. I never thought it would be something I'd be doing for a full-time living, but I was already interested in broadcasting. I was already setting my sights on going to college for broadcasting, but I was more interested in radio.
Mhm.
In 1991, there was no internet, there was no social media, there was no YouTube. So for me, it was either you do radio, you do news, or you become a sports announcer. I mean, those seem to be my options behind a microphone. So I saw ring announcing as just an opportunity to get my foot in the door behind a microphone. but I was really setting my sights on being a radio personality. That was kind of where I saw myself. But people would tell me, "Hey, you've got a good voice for announcing or this or that." So, but certainly as your career goes on, you hone your trade and you learn how to use your voice,
Hmm.
in the best way that you possibly can. And I think that's, one of the key things with ring announcing is I think a lot of guys use more of a fictitious type of voice, or they try too hard and they start screaming or this or that. So I try my best to do everything where people can understand every word I'm saying and add excitement and have good voice flux at times. And so I just do the best I can with what God gave me, Luke. That's all you can do.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that. Let's talk about a few things that kind of overlap. So you got into the ring announcing kind of things. You was also competing in bodybuilding, and you also tried your hand at professional wrestling yourself. So we can put that into some sort of order. In which way did that kind of go? So from the ring announcing to the bodybuilding to getting in the ring, wrestling style, not boxing style. But yeah, take us through how that came to fruition.
Yeah, when I was about 14, 15 years old, a friend of mine and I joined a gym. I was very, very thin. He was a bit on the chubby side, but we both said, look, man, we want to start getting some girls, and we want to get our physiques looking better. So we really got dedicated to training, and I was very thin, but I was lucky to be very lean. I have some muscularity at the same time, and I quickly started to see results. And I was told by some of the competitive bodybuilders at the gym I trained at, hey, you should look into competing in teenage bodybuilding. And I said, that sounds interesting. I started going to some of the local bodybuilding shows to see some of the guys I knew from the gym compete. And I said, before I turn 20, I definitely want to compete someday as a bodybuilder. So um, when I was nine, so I started ring announcing at 17, boxing and pro wrestling. I started doing boxing first, and then I started ring announcing small independent pro wrestling shows in front of 25, 30, 40, 50 people, the smallest shows you could possibly imagine. But just to be involved in professional wrestling for me at 17, 18 years old, it was, a dream come true already. So continued with my dream of competing in bodybuilding, continued with my goal of, ring announcing. And at 19, I finally did it. I competed in bodybuilding. I was very fortunate. I ended up winning the 1992 Teenage Mr. Illinois bodybuilding competition. So I won the middleweight division, and then I won the overall, where you go against the lightweight and heavyweight competitor. So it was, an incredible feeling to achieve a goal that I had been striving for 4 or 5 years as a teenager. And now I'm in this, I'm in the best shape I had been in as a teenager. And I'm ring announcing a pro wrestling show. And one of the wrestlers said, hey, congratulations on winning the bodybuilding contest. You should think about wrestling. I mean, with a physique like that, you should think about. And I said, you know what? I would love to try it. I it had always been kind of in the back of my mind, Luke,
Mm.
but I was more interested. I was finishing high school. I wanted to compete in bodybuilding. I was setting my sights on college. Becoming a pro wrestler wasn't really like exactly what I was planning, but the opportunity was there. So I said, that's it. I'm going to do it. Trained and ended up making my professional wrestling debut about 3, 4 months into training. And then eventually got very lucky. Within a year, had an opportunity to start wrestling as enhancement talent or a jobber for World Championship Wrestling, WCW, which in 1993 was the number 2 company next to the WWF, which is now WWE. So that's kind of the Cliff Note version, if you will. Maybe I went a little long with it, but that was kind of the course my life took.
Yeah, so I find it fascinating with pro wrestling. So obviously over in the UK, we know about the WWF, WWE with your big names and whatnot, but in America, certainly, the smaller circuits, the independent circuits, certainly in the early 90s, late 80s, it was a massive thing now, and I find it really interesting because competing in bodybuilding, there's so many other sports that can kind of guide somebody towards wrestling that didn't necessarily have that initial thought process. Like the name that springs to mind is Bill Goldberg. he was seen at a gym and he was told, you've got the physique, the look to be
Yeah.
a pro wrestler. I think Glenn Jacobs, who went on to become Kane, he was something similar. He was an American footballer, and then he was kind of sort of, look at your physique, look at the size, you could go and do something over here. And it's not really something that's too commonplace over here. If we had like a Premier League footballer, soccer player, they're not really going to
Right.
be guided towards becoming a pro wrestler. But because of the sports in America with your basketball, your pro football and everything, these guys are big lads and of course competing in bodybuilding. I do find it quite fascinating. It can all kind of lead to a path into pro wrestling.
And I was just watching, I love watching YouTube documentaries and watching old stuff on professional wrestling from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And, there's been actually quite a few competitive bodybuilders that ended up making that transition. Larry Hellwig, the Ultimate Warrior, he started off in the bodybuilding world that led to him training and becoming a wrestler. Sting, he was a competitive bodybuilder. John Cena competed in bodybuilding. Tom Zink, the Z-Man back in the day, So I certainly wasn't the first, competitive bodybuilder to make that transition to professional wrestling. And, at that time in the early 90s, it was the land of the giants, though.
You took
And
that
that
off the
was
tip of my tongue, yeah.
probably,
You took that off the tip of
and
my
that
tongue.
was,
That was going to be my comment, yeah.
yeah, and that was probably one of the things that made me second guess myself initially because, I'm 5'10, 5'10 and a half, almost 5'11, but I'm not over 6 feet tall. I'm not, I wasn't 250 pounds or anything, but I looked, when I got contacted to work for WCW, the first thing they told me was, we like your look.
Hmm.
We think you'd look good on camera. We'd like to bring you in for TV and house shows. And that was kind of how it started, was because of, my physique, even though I wasn't the biggest guy. But yeah, I mean, certainly former football players and stuff like that usually make that transition because they've already got that big size.
Of course, now it'd be amiss of me not to mention a couple of names that you, as you say, jobbed for in the WCW. Rick Rude, Stone Cold Steve Austin. Before he was Stone Cold Steve Austin, he was Stunning Steve Austin when he had the long blonde hair, which still throws a lot of people off. When you see those pictures from the early 90s and he's not got the shaved head and he's got that long blonde hair, I still think it throws a lot of people off. But tell me the story of wrestling, what became Stone Cold Steve Austin in those days.
Yeah, Steve was great. He was stunning Steve Austin at the time when I went to wrestle for WCW. He was in a tag team called the Hollywood Blondes with Flying Brian Pillman, who sadly ended up passing away. And they were a great tag team. I think they were kind of held back for maybe some political reasons, but man, I really, really was a fan of theirs. So to actually get to wrestle them was fantastic. And you never know who's going to be that breakout star in professional wrestling. I mean, certainly Steve Austin had incredible wrestling ability, but he was, nobody could have anticipated that he would become one of the biggest stars in professional wrestling history. But I was only 19 years old, and they knew I was very young. They knew I was in the wrestling business for under a year. So, they worked with me. They were, really nice guys, very, very professional. I could see the work ethic. And, speaking of Steve Austin, one thing I always remember is when we were in the locker room, he would always stand right by the curtain watching all the matches. And I mean, he would stand there throughout the whole show.
Mhm.
And, everybody's, playing, some people are playing cards and just sitting around the locker room. And I always remember seeing Steve right there by the curtain watching the matches that were going on at that time. So he was a true student of the game. You could tell he took it very seriously. And I'm not shocked that he had the success he had.
Did you ever go on to cross paths with Steve in the years after, you transitioned over to boxing and he made it to the very top echelons of pro wrestling? Have you ever crossed paths with him again?
Have not, almost did. I went. I was visiting a friend one time in California, and I was going into the Gold's Gym in Venice to work out, and we pulled in the parking lot, my friend and I, and couldn't believe my eyes. Steve was walking to his car. in Venice Beach, California. And I got out of the car and I was just walking to try and see if he took off in his Jeep. So I just missed him. I just missed him, to say hello to him. And that would have been very, very cool. I hope someday I do get to cross paths with him.
Yeah, that'd be great if you do get the opportunity. Now, Thomas, take us through the procedure of coming out of pro wrestling and kind of focusing then on the ring announcing and when you started realizing, you know what, this is a career, this is what I'm going to do full time, this is what's going to pay the bills. Did you ever know right at the very start that it was going to go as big as it is and be on the shows and the platforms that you're on now?
Absolutely not. I knew even when I was wrestling, I was still ring announcing. Not pro wrestling. When I was strictly a professional wrestler, but I was still ring announcing boxing events every 2-3 months. I would ring announce a boxing event. There was some weekends where I would do a boxing event on Friday, ring announce a boxing event, and wrestle on Saturday. So I really fell in love with being in the ring and performing in some way. But so after 2 years of wrestling, had my stint as enhancement talent for WCW as Tommy Tana. And then I wrestled on the Independents as TNT. That was my wrestling name on the Independents, TNT. So after, I just kind of got to a point after a couple years of doing it where I just felt like it wasn't what I wanted to continue to do. I just felt like, man, I really want to be a ring announcer. Like that's really where my heart was. And I've always been one to tell people who have any goals or aspirations to do something. I say, look, man, follow your heart. Because when you follow your dream of what you really want to do, it's not going to feel like work. You're going to be willing to do whatever it takes. That's when you know you truly love something. I mean, I slept in my car. I made such little money. I'd be in my tuxedo, sleeping in my car, make enough money to buy a sandwich and pay for my gas. People don't know the dues that people pay sometimes in their industry. So now when I'm staying at these 5-star hotels in Saudi Arabia or Los Angeles, New York, or in England, Queensberry always puts me in very nice hotels. I feel very fortunate, but I never could have imagined that my ring announcing career, because I was really against setting my sights on radio after I finished my wrestling. I thought, you know what? I'll continue to ring announce, but I'm going to set my sights more on radio and getting somewhere on a radio station, which I did. I ended up on a country radio station and, had a taste of working in radio. But as luck has it, the money and opportunity was there in boxing as a ring announcer. So I just went that direction.
Fantastic. Now, when did it take off? What was it? Was it a moment when you thought, you say that you come through the hardship, sleeping in your car, scraping bits of money together to live? Was there a moment where you kind of felt like I've kicked the door down now? This is the opportunity. This is taking off.
It was in the mid 90s, 1995. I got my first opportunity to be on national TV as a ring announcer. It was also the first time a promoter flew me, paid me $500 US dollars. To me, I was like, wow, that was my biggest payday up until that point. I made more money wrestling than that, but as a ring announcer, to get $500 for one event, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And they're flying me. I'm going to get on an airplane. I'm going to another state, to ring announce. So made my debut on ESPN, which is a big sports channel here in the U.S. And to be on national TV as a ring announcer in 1995 was a pretty big deal because there was not a lot of opportunity to be on television in 1995, especially as a ring announcer. If you were, Michael Buffer, Jimmy Lennon Jr., I mean, all the TV gigs were taken. So for me to end up on television in 1995 at 21 years of age as a ring announcer, it was an incredible opportunity, and was very fortunate that one opportunity led to many more, and here I am today.
In those times that you say the faces of ring announcing boxing was Michael Buffer, Jimmy Lennon Jr., amongst others, did you take inspiration for those guys? Even though you want to be unique and have your own style and your own way of doing things, was you looking up to those guys and thinking like, these are the godfathers of my profession, if you like?
Absolutely. I was like, look, I got to study these guys. I need to see what they do because I want to work at that level someday. So I watched how they announced the decision. I paid attention to their cadence inside the ring, how they looked professional. So, I wanted to do everything I could to be perceived as a professional ring announcer. And I think, whenever I have young ring announcers reaching out to me, I always tell them, look, learn how to do the decisions, learn how to pronounce and do your best at pronouncing names from all over the world. I mean, those are the more important things than going in there and just having a ring announcer voice. You need you pay attention to those details because when you do get a big opportunity, you're going to get exposed if you don't do those things properly. Those are the most important things. But I really admired Jimmy Lennon. I really admired Michael Buffer. And I was very fortunate that as years went on, I had the opportunity to work side by side with both of them as a undercard ring announcer with Jimmy Lennon. I was doing a lot of undercards when he was on the Showtime network. With Michael Buffer, I was doing undercards when he was doing the HBO fights. And now I have this incredible opportunity to work with Michael Buffer regularly with all the Riyadh season and the ring events. And I'm very honored to call him a friend and colleague. And I've known him for many, many years. And he's a great guy and he's been very supportive.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting just to pick up on something you said there, where if you used to speak to the younger guys and give them advice and, to do the basics and don't worry about the big voice, all that comes later. In a weird way, that kind of borrows itself to the fundamentals of being a boxer, in terms of doing the basics right, the footwork, the jab, the big right hand or the flashy footwork or the showboating, that all comes later. And if you don't put the fundamentals in at the beginning, you'll get found out later on. And that's quite similar to what you're saying there about get your decisions correct, get your pronunciation correct, and the big voice and the showbiz, that'll all come later.
Absolutely. And, I think today with social media, everybody can be on camera. Everybody can just grab their phone and video themselves and put themselves on social media. And, but like I said earlier, it was a big deal to be on TV in the mid 90s. But that wasn't even, honestly, Luke, that was not even my focus as a ring announcer. I just loved doing it.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to get as good as I could. I never thought of ring announcing as a career. So if you're getting into ring announcing because you want to learn it and learn the trade, hey, that's great. I've always been one to try and give anyone advice if they're trying to follow their dreams. But you'll get here and there, you'll get a guy or something where you could kind of tell that they just want to be on camera. They just want to be, in the limelight, which there's nothing wrong with that. I like performing. I like being in front of an audience and being on television. There's nothing wrong with that, but you should really be wanting to learn, the trade.
Absolutely. In terms of learning the trade, Thomas, is there any kind of, before any kind of event, we always see the cameras following the boxes at big events, the fighters entering the stadium, the arena, wherever it may be, and obviously focus on them, and rightly so, they're the stars of the show. But is there any kind of pre-fight night ritual that you follow? Is he, do you go through prep? Is there any kind of superstitions that you have? Do you put your left sock on first, your right sock on first, anything like that?
I'm definitely a creature of habit. I like to do things in a certain pattern, in a certain way. Um, you know, with all the events, I will host the weigh-in, and that's usually my opportunity to meet with all the fighters one on one and get the correct pronunciations, and then after the weigh-in, that's when I'll work on my cards for the event. And so I take a lot of time to prepare my notes as good as I can. I bullet point things though. I don't write things word for word. Early in my career, when I was very nervous and I was afraid to make a mistake, I would write everything out almost word for word. But now as time goes on, I don't have to write out things. I'll just put black trunks, 126.6, red corner, and just ad lib, and it comes across much more natural when you're ad libbing, because I can sometimes hear when someone's just reading a script, but I definitely show prep. I always try and get a good night's sleep before an event, try and have a good breakfast to start the day and just try and feel, I'm always traveling. I'm traveling international. So I'm in all these different time zones.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very hard on the body. But you do in fact, when we just did the last show with Inoue, the Japanese champion, we did that fight. I believe it was only about 4 a.m. in the U.S. when we went live in Saudi Arabia at 1 p.m. Saudi time. So, I hear, that's, as an American, I'm not usually ring announcing at 4 o'clock in the morning. So, you've got these physical challenges. So, but the key is exercise, good nutrition, and getting proper sleep and preparing for the event the best you can.
Was there a time when you can look back on and think, that was the first time, maybe on a bigger platform, a wider scale, that you made your first mistake? Maybe there was a name that you fumbled or a decision that you read out wrong. We've seen little clips on YouTube of the ring announcer on a show somewhere in America. I'm not sure exactly where it was, and he announced it wrong, and he had to go back. And that was all kind of awkward.
I think that was in Australia.
Was it Australia? Sorry, yeah, not
yeah.
America, Australia. But has there ever been a situation like that for yourself?
Well, I mean, look, we're all human. We're all going to make mistakes. Things are going to happen. Early in my career, when I was doing an ESPN show, I can't remember if it was maybe my third time on ESPN. I made a critical mistake of leaving my card ringside when I went in to announce a decision. The fight had got stopped, but I go in the ring with my microphone, and I'm not realizing that I just left my card on the table ringside. I go in, I talk to the timekeeper, and as I'm talking to the timekeeper, this is when I realize, wait a minute, I don't have my card. And he's giving me the time. And as I turn around, the floor director, the ESPN floor director, is going, go, 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 giving me my cue. And I'm like, oh, there was no time for me to go walk out of the ring and, get my card, So the amateur rookie I was, I went with it. And as I was announcing, I was like 2 minutes, 25 seconds of round number 4, your winner by technical knockout. And I'm going, I don't know this guy's name. And so I just said to him, now here's where I made the mistake, Luke. I had the microphone and I leaned into him and I said, what's your name? But the unfortunate thing was, or fortunate kind of, I had the microphone right here. So people heard me say, what's your name? And this thing went viral. I mean, it was very embarrassing. I thought my career was over, and but I never made that mistake again. Okay. But I went many, many years without any, serious mistakes or anything happening that went viral until this year. I was doing a grand arrival, and you know what I'm talking about. In Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, I was doing the grand arrivals. It wasn't in the ring. It was a grand arrival. And it was when Moses Atalma fought Dillian White. And I get my cue to go with my introduction of Dillian White to bring him out to the stage. And as I'm introducing him, in my ear, I wear what's called an IFB. So the director in the truck can talk to me. Mm-hmm. And as I'm doing my introduction of him from Brixton, London, England, his record, and I'm going through it, they're telling me in my ear, Thomas, he's not backstage. Thomas, he's not backstage. And I'm like hearing, and it's distracting me as I'm announcing. So as I get to saying his name, again, I'm like, Dillian, Thomas, he's not backstage. And the word baby instead of body came out. So I said, the baby snatcher. Now, here's the thing. I was so distracted, I didn't even know I said baby. And he didn't even come out for like 2-3 minutes. Now, on the edited video on Instagram, it looks like he comes walking out. He didn't. He wasn't backstage. So that's, that distraction caused me. So I walk off stage and I see people laughing. And I'm like, what's going on? And they're like, mate, you said baby snatcher. I said, no, I didn't. Body snatcher. They said, no, you said baby. And I was like, oh my God. So look, Luke, it's water under the bridge, as they say now. There's nothing you can do about it. I'm not one to make excuses. If I make a mistake, I will say I made a mistake. And look, the director didn't put that word in my mouth, but truth be told, there's probably a very, very small chance I would have said baby they had not been talking to him in my ear. And even some of the other people heard that were wearing an IFB, like Adi Oladipo and a few people. They knew that they were talking to me,
Yeah.
and I said, look, so look, it happened. You know, it's caused a lot of laughs. I'm happy that people have gotten some enjoyment out of it. It certainly was embarrassing, and you never want that to happen. But look, when you do this as often as I do, things are going to happen.
Absolutely. The one thing that I will give you credit for, Thomas, is I think he was with one of the other YouTube outlets doing an interview with Dillian White, and he seen you and he shouted and he wanted some kind of confrontation. And you were straight over
Yep.
there. You explained to him exactly what had happened. You apologized, and it would have been very. Dillian's a big man. He's a big character. He's very outspoken. He can be quite volatile. But you were straight up there and you give him the reasons for why you said it. You apologized, and
Yeah.
I'll give you your flowers for that. It was very respectful of you to do, when a lot of people could have avoided that.
Yeah, and Dillian, I think a lot of people thought maybe he was very upset with me. I even saw him at the hotel maybe an hour or two after that. We had a few laughs, and he didn't take it personal. It was a mistake. I mean, it was an honest mistake, and things happen. Again, I'm sorry that I made that mistake to him. And, no one wants to be called a baby snatcher. But he was a really good sport about it.
That's good to hear. It's good to hear. We're skipping over a couple of chapters here, so I want to go back a little bit. 2008, I think you made your UK debut as a ring announcer, Carl Froch, against Jean Pascal, I want to say, with a certain
John
Mr. Tyson.
Pascal.
Yeah, John
Yep, Carl's
Pascal.
first world title fight.
Yeah, a great victory for Carl Froch, and a certain Mr. Tyson Fury made his debut on that card as well. Talk to me a little bit how that opportunity came around and your memories of that great night.
Well, that was December of 2008, and I got a call from Hennessy Sports, Mick Hennessy's company at the time, and his secretary contacted me and said that they had this event in Nottingham. It was a world title fight. They wanted to bring me in to be the ring announcer. So got that opportunity. They flew me to Nottingham. I honestly wasn't too familiar with Carl Froch at the time as an American. He wasn't too visible here at that time, but I certainly became a huge Carl Froch fan after that. And that was my first opportunity. And not only did Carl fight John Pascal in the main event, but Tyson Fury made his pro debut on our opening TV fight. And this aired on ITV. So a lot of exposure, great opportunity. And Mick Hennessy, about a week after, called me and said, Tommy, we were happy with your work and we'd love to bring you back. And it sparked about a 2-year relationship of doing events in the UK. We eventually went from ITV to Channel 5. Mm-hmm. And I, had the opportunity to do several of Tyson Fury's early fights. Mick had a pretty good roster at that time. And after doing, about 2, maybe close to 3 years of events for Mick Hennessy, the work in the UK kind of went dry for a few years until I got that phone call in September of 2017 from Frank Warren's Queensberry.
Yeah, so just before we move into that, and what a great opportunity that worked out to be, one thing I wanted to pick your brains about, you mentioned there about working in terms of UK broadcasters with ITV and Channel 5. Of course, now we've got the Zone. In the past, we've had BT Sports, TNT Sports, Sky Sports, amongst others. In the States, it seems to be a real dearth of platforms for boxing to be aired on. The Zone is over there, but we've seen Top Rank lose the ESPN deal. We've seen Showtime pull out of boxing, HBO pull out of boxing. From a broadcasting point of view, or a boxing person and a boxing fan, talk to me about your thoughts on what's going on in terms of the platforms and the TV and the exposure for American boxing.
Yeah, I think that with now Zuffa Boxing starting up, I believe January 23rd is their first event on Paramount Plus. I think that's going to be a big, hopefully spark some kind of growth here in the U.S. market, because certainly with HBO going away, Showtime going away, now ESPN not continuing to work with Top Rank, that has certainly left a big void here in the U.S. market for boxing fans. So I'm hoping that Zuffa boxing will be successful because it's good for boxing. It's in and it'll hopefully make things grow here in the U.S. for fight fans. And I've been very thankful that Frank Warren Queensberry has started working with DAZN, the global home of boxing, as they call it. I have seen, as I do events now in the US, that more and more people are seeing the events in the UK here in the US. So I think the US fans have really started to recognize more than ever how great boxing is in the UK and how great the fans are there. And now, even with the ring events and the Riyadh season shows, we've done shows in New York, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas. And so it's been great to not only work in Saudi Arabia with His Excellency and those events there, but also be able to work even in London. We've done in Riyadh season shows. So to expand outside Saudi Arabia as well has been fantastic.
Definitely. Now with the zone, we see that Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn for so long they butted heads here in the UK. And if I was to go back 2 or 3 years, maybe a little bit longer, the idea of these two guys, not only on speaking terms but working together, would be alien to us here in the UK. Do you think the zone putting everybody under the one umbrella and making it accessible at one, platform is a good thing, or do you think that maybe like somebody like Zuffa and being on Paramount, that competition is a good thing? It drives people to want to do better.
I think it's been great. I think there's been fights that fight fans have wanted to see. And when we did the 5 versus 5 in Riyadh, I mean, how fantastic was that? And I think Frank Warren and Eddie are open to maybe even doing something like that again. I never thought when I first started working for Queensberry in 2017, I never thought that we would be working hand in hand with Matchroom in the way we have. So I think it's been great. I think I think there's been a lot of upside to Queensberry and Matchroom working together. It's given fight fans fights that perhaps we would not have seen. So I look at it all as a big plus.
Definitely. Now, in those early days when you got the opportunity from Frank Warren to work with Queensberry Promotions, was there a feeling of us and them, in terms of Queensberry and Matchroom, that it was they're on that side, we're on this side, we don't kind of mix? Was it that kind of volatile rivalry?
Not really. I never really, nobody really ever said that. It was just kind of known that they were a competitor in the UK, but certainly I never looked at them as an enemy or, anything like that. I mean, and that's been one of the great things for me out of this relationship as well, is that I've had the opportunity to work with Matchroom, and they have a great staff, of people that work under Eddie Hearn and to work with Eddie himself. So I never imagined that, I'd be working that closely with Eddie Hearn and the Matchroom staff. And they're all professionals. They've never shown any type of, resentment towards me or anything, because I work, all the Queensberry shows. And so I've been, it's been fantastic.
As you've said, you've been very lucky to be able to travel the world announcing some of the biggest fights with the biggest fighters. You've been Riyadh, all different places in the States, over here in the UK. Is there a particular favorite of yours in terms of a venue to announce at?
Well, I get asked that question quite a bit. And, certainly as a ring announcer, working in another country, Luke, there's no bigger honor. There's no bigger honor. I told you my first event I did in 1995 on ESPN. I couldn't believe that this promoter actually sent me airfare to go ring announce. And to take it to another level now of having promoters fly me around the world to be the voice of their events, there's just no bigger honor. And certainly the UK has become a second home to me. I just celebrated over 8 years of working for Queensberry now and being part of all of their events. So when you get an opportunity to work a venue like Wembley Stadium in front of over 90,000 fans, I mean, that is the hair standing up on my arms right now. I mean, that is a pinch me moment, because not many entertainers, whether you're a singer, actor, dancer, whatever you may do, not many people can say they've performed in front of over 90,000 live fans, not including the worldwide television audience, but over 90,000 people surrounding a ring has certainly been, an incredible experience. So Wembley Stadium in London for me, and Tottenham's Hotspur Stadium, that's a fantastic venue as well. And we've had some great crowds there with Eubank Ben, their two fights, and over 60,000 fans. But man, over 90,000 fans, Luke, that's a whole other, animal right there. So Wembley Stadium, London for me has been absolutely my favorite place to perform thus far.
Amazing. Now, I'm going to sound slightly biased here because, of course, I'm British. I'm from the UK, but we're long touted as the most passionate, the best boxing fans in the world. There's a lot of American fighters that'll say that, the fighters from all over the world. What is it from your perspective of being a ring announcer? And like you say, you're involved with a fight week, whether it be the press conferences, the weigh-ins, which can usually be attended by the public. What is it about the British fight fan, from your point of view, from what you've seen, that makes us so unique, so special, and so passionate?
Their knowledge of the sport, how closely they follow the sport. They show their enthusiasm with the way they cheer. They sing the songs that you guys have. When a fighter's making that ring entrance, the crowd just erupts with excitement. And, as a performer, you feed off of that type of excitement. So when it's a hot crowd, as we call it in professional wrestling, we got a hot crowd out there, I mean, you feed off that hot crowd. And the UK never disappoints with that. So, I mean, look, there's great boxing fans all over the world. I really enjoy performing. Any opportunity I get to step inside of a ring in my tuxedo, I feel very honored. But the enthusiasm that the fight fans show in the UK is second to none.
Absolutely. Now we'll look forward to close out the interview because it's been a fascinating chat and I've really enjoyed having you on
Thank
today,
you.
Thomas. We're looking forward to 2026. We start off with a bang with Queensbury. Certainly here in Manchester, we've got the magnificent seven card, headlined by the ever exciting Moses Atama, one of the highlights of the UK boxing scene at the minute. You excited for the new year? You excited for what's to come with Queensbury?
Absolutely, absolutely. Like I said, I finished the year with 9 straight weeks of being on the road, and that included 4 different countries. I did Australia, Saudi Arabia, England, and the U.S. all in, and that was 2 trips to Saudi Arabia, 2 trips to the UK, Australia, and the U.S. So I'm enjoying a little bit of time off right now, licking my wounds, as they say, getting some rest and, enjoying a break from the airports and the hotels. But I'll tell you what, when I get on that airplane January 20th for the Atalma Franklin event, the Magnificent Seven, I'm going to be ready. I'm excited. I know Queensbury has already announced several great events coming up. We'll have Nick Ball back in action defending his featherweight world title in his hometown of Liverpool. I know in March we're going to be heading to Dublin, Ireland with a great card as well. So I'm just super excited, to get this year going and also continue being part of the Ring and Riyadh season shows. January 31st, I get to, on my bucket list, I've always wanted to ring announce at Madison Square Garden. I mean,
This will
that's
be the first
where
time. This will be the
that'll
first
be
time.
my first time.
Amazing.
I've ring announced at Madison Square Garden in their theater.
Yeah,
They have a theater adjacent to the arena, but I've never ring announced in the arena.
amazing.
And that's where WrestleMania 1 was held. The rich history, they call it the world's most famous arena for a reason because there's so much history at Madison Square Garden. So on January 31st, when Teofimo Lopez fights Shakur Stevenson, I won't be doing the main event. The great Michael Buffer will be doing the main event, but I will get to do the full undercard and scratch one off my bucket list and perform at Madison Square Garden. So super excited about that one as well. And then, of course, there's going to be several ring events and Riyadh season shows in 2026 as well.
Amazing. Some great fights that you mentioned there. Thomas, final question. If you could have 3 fantasy fights to make in 2026 for you to ring announce, putting you on the spot here, I've not given you no prior heads up that we're going to do this, but 3 fights that you'd love to see in 2026 that you'd announce.
Wow. Okay. I live in San Antonio, Texas. I had the opportunity to do his fight on the ring show when I did the Devin Haney Brian Norman fight. But right before that fight, I did the Jesse Bam Rodriguez fight. I'm a big fan of Jesse. He lives here in San Antonio. I would love to see him, perhaps fight somebody like Naoya Inoue, something like that. I mean, to do a fight like that would be fantastic. I think they're both pound for pound, the top fighters, easily in the world. So that would certainly be one. And throw Nick Ball in there as well. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Nick Ball. I mean, the kid is, when I introduce him, I announce him as the fearless, relentless, reigning and defending world champion for a reason, because he just doesn't stop throwing punches. He's an exciting fighter to watch. So to see Nick Ball, fight someone in that featherweight division like a Jesse Bam Rodriguez or something like that would be absolutely incredible as well. And then when you move to the heavyweight division, I mean, Queensberry is just dominating the heavyweight division. There's so many dream matchups now. And with Tyson Fury looking to make his return, in 2026, I mean, I would love to do, let's say, a Tyson Fury Fabio Wardley fight, something like that. I think that would be a great domestic, what do you guys call it? A domestic dust up or something like that?
Domestic dust
up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that would be a tremendous domestic dust up. So, those would certainly be some of the great fights I would love to have an opportunity to ring announce.
Amazing. Thomas, as I've said numerous occasions, it's been really fascinating to speak with you today. I really do appreciate your time. Is there anything you'd like to add before we close out?
No, Luke, I just always appreciate anyone's interest in speaking with me. I thank you for reaching out. Happy New Year to your continued success with your show. You do a great job. I appreciate your professionalism. If anybody wants to follow me on social media, I am on Instagram, Facebook, and X. Just look me up, Thomas Treiber. That's Treiber, as you see on the screen right there. So, please follow me on YouTube or anywhere. And I appreciate all the fight fans' support.
Amazing, Thomas. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.